All right, so our last video, we looked at the intelligence agencies exposed, Freemasonic, occult, symbolism, and logos revealed, CIA, FBI, NSA. I mentioned in the video I might make part 2, and I figured, how can I not, give you some history on these, intelligence agencies. We will read from the book Vatican Assassins by Eric John Phelps. Dear Truth Seeker, why did the Vatican refuse to formally recognize the nation of Israel from 1948 to 1993 when one of its greatest Jesuit-trained tools, Cardinal Spellman, was responsible for its admittance into the United Nations? Our lesson is that Rome, the two-headed Janus, always has two policies. The first is her open but false policy intended for public consumption. The second is her secret but true policy intended to be pursued. In this light, what true policy is Pope John Paul II following, the man who worked for IG Farben near Auschwitz during World War II, that will cause him to formally recognize the Jewish state and ask his forgiveness for the Crusades, Inquisitions, and the Third Reich? The only answer is that the Jesuit general's infallible Pope will say anything and do anything to gain possession of Jerusalem. Ah, dear truth seeker, the ends always justify the means. This principle will surface again when dealing with the Kennedy assassination. Now that Zionist Israel was a member of Rome's United Nations, she needed secret police to keep her politicians like Yitzhak Rabin in line. So the Nazi who helped to set up the CIA was also used to train the Mossad. He was the Pope's Knight of Malta, Reinhard Galen. And if this Jesuit-Nazi-Zionist relationship were ever to surface, the evidence would be liquidated. Mark Lane tells us. Mikhail Greenwald was an impoverished European Jew who settled in Israel and spent his meager life savings to publish self-penned articles of a decidedly dissenting political nature using an antiquated mimeograph machine. In an article now known forever in Israel jurisprudence as pamphlet number 51, he stated that Rudolf Kastner, Dr. Rudolf Kastner, one of Israel's most honored Zionist leaders, was a traitor who had cooperated with Nazi leaders of Germany, including Adolf Eichmann, who later declared, "I will gladly jump into my grave into the knowledge that 5 million enemies of the right, the Jews, have already died like animals." To deport 476,000 Jews from Hungary, Greenwald was charged by the Zionist State of Israel with the high crime of having published a criminal libel. In time, he was indicted. Before official action could be taken against Kastner, who had embarrassed the state, the good doctor was shot to death in front of his home at 6 Emmanuel Street in Tel Aviv by Zeev Eckstein, who until a few months before the murder had been a paid undercover agent of the Mossad, the Israeli intelligence service. All dear truth seekers, Zionist Israel is a creation of the Jesuit order. Did not Golda Meir publicly honor the Black Popes Pius XII, who had concorded with Hitler? Its purpose is to secure Jerusalem for the Jesuits' infallible Pope, that he may receive worldwide worship from Solomon's rebuilt temple. If the Masonic racially Jewish Zionist and the Masonic religiously Talmudic Orthodox chief rabbis betrayed their own Jewish race into Pius XII's concentration camps overseen by the Jesuit order, would they not betray the nation of Israel by giving Jerusalem to the Pope in preparation for the rebuilding of Solomon's temple? Did not Israel's chief Rabbi Yonah Metzger meet with Pope John Paul II in 2004? World War I prepared the land for the people. World War II prepared the people for the land. Betrayed by the Zionists and broken by foreign invaders due to worldwide anti-Jewish fury directed by Satan's Black Pope, Armageddon will prepare the chosen Jewish people for their Messiah. For in the words of the great Messianic Jew, David Barron, Jesus of Nazareth is Israel's king, and so sure and certain as there was once a cross raised from him on Golgotha, so certain it is that the Lord God will yet give unto him the throne of his father David, and he will reign on Mount Zion and before his ancients gloriously. Then shall come to pass the words of Isaiah the prophet, quoted by the apostle Paul, and so all Israel shall be saved, as it is written, there shall come out of Sion the deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob. Romans 11:26. Now this is all the King James Bible he's quoting in this book, because he's a King James only guy. Now let's continue reading. One of the prime reasons for creating the Cold War was to justify the creation of a huge intelligence community in the free world. replacing Protestant liberties with Rome's corporate fascism called national security. To do this, the preservation of Hitler's Nazi intelligence apparatus, financed by the Jesuits' Federal Reserve Bank, was essential. This Jesuit Inquisition would be merged into the American Empire's CIA. We read, General Reinhard Gehlen, Hitler's chief intelligence officer against the Soviet Union, had struck a deal with the Americans called Operation Sunrise. The principal negotiators were Alan Dulles and William Casey of the USS, Sir William Stevenson for the British, and SS General Carl Wolfe. Their negotiations enabled Gehlen to bring his entire apparatus unpurged and without interruption into the service of the American superpower. According to Heinz Hohner and Hermann Solling, the authors of The General was a spy. Further, Alan Dulles had been instrumental in arranging with Gehlen and with SS General Gestapo Heinrich Müller, who met with Dulles in Switzerland, was ushered into the U.S. and given citizenship, worked for the CIA, retired with rank of general, and died in 1973 unbothered by any further investigations. For this most unusual conversion of one of Hitler's most sinister generals into an officer in the U.S. Army, but the details of Gehlen's personal surrender and subsequent flight to the United States in General Eisenhower's own VIP aircraft were arranged by U.S. Army officers. It is important to note the active role of these U.S. Army officials in this unprecedented move of Hitler's own intelligence chief Gehlen directly into the U.S. Army as an officer by a special act of Congress. To make the evacuation of Nazis possible, enabling them to escape Europe, the Vatican established intricate escape routes, the Vatican Red Lines, as the priests helped John H. Surratt escape from the United States after the Lincoln assassination. So they helped thousands of Nazis to escape from Europe after the Second 30 Years' War. This would only be possible through a unified international intelligence community in control of the superpowers' military machines. This community was and is controlled by the Jesuits in Rome, as they have ruled the Eternal City since their restoration in 1814. Of the Red Lines we read, Unholy Trinity is the story of the Vatican's underground Nazi smuggling networks, codenamed Operation Red Line. The first hints of the existence of the Vatican's Red Lines emerged in America. General Turco was a communist double agent in German, Japanese, British, French, and American intelligence. All the intelligence agencies worked together, including Russian intelligence. It was Turco who splintered the anti-Bolshevik groups after World War I. He further entrenched the Jesuits, Bolsheviks, Lenin, and Stalin in power, sent Hitler false information that crushed the Nazis on the Eastern Fronts. Remember, Hitler did not permit the German army to capture Moscow. The purpose of Operation Barbarossa was to pave the way for the 4 mobile gassing units to purge Western Russia of its Jews. This having been accomplished, the German army was then to be betrayed by Hitler and crushed by Stalin's with the FDR's Lend-Lease provisions, helped turn the Vatican Red Lines into a vehicle for Soviet intelligence during the Cold War. During World War II, the Vatican and Soviet intelligence worked together. Are we to believe that with overnight decision to make Soviet Russia an international boogeyman, that this intelligence connection was absolutely severed, especially when we can see Turco, Gehlen, Gestapo, Mueller, Engelton, Philby, Montini, and others at one time or another having all worked together, and culminated his career by prematurely instigating the Hungarian Revolution of 1956. The very patriots, Roman Catholic patriots, incited by Turco to revolt, were betrayed into the hands of a Cardinal Aga Giants, KGB by Cardinal Spellman, CIA directed by Knight of Malta, Wild Bill Donovan. Did this not fulfill the continuing policy of the Jesuits' Holy Alliance by crushing all movements toward popular liberty and national sovereignty while furthering the papal Caesar's universal temporal power and governing every nation on earth from Jerusalem? An additional connection between Western and Eastern intelligence communities was another knight, Kim Philby. Like Turgot, he was of noble blood. As an English royal, he was British CIS agent, an American CIA agent, and a Russian KGB agent simultaneously. When it became too evident in England, He defected to Russia and participated in a Kennedy assassination via Lee Harvey Oswald's connection with the KGB. Another connection to Philby was Anthony Blunt and his Cambridge spy ring called the Magnificent Five, of which Philby was a member. Through Blunt, Russian intelligence was linked to the British secret circles, the British royal family, the White House, and American intelligence. Sir Anthony, who died in 1988, was like Philby, British knight, KGB kingpin, and loyal to Sir Stuart Menzies, past head of the British SIS. Both Blunt and Philby were obviously linked to the Vatican intelligence through Prince Angelo de Mohana, the Grand Master of the Sovereign Military Order of Malta. Mohana, holding the status of cardinal until its death in 88, is also a member of the Palazzo Giustiniani Freemasonic Lodge, which practices the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite of Great Britain. He was said to have been imposed as Grand Master by the British Secret Intelligence Services on behalf of Queen Elizabeth II. These three men, Blunt, Philby, Mohana, not to mention Guy Burks, Donald MacLean, and John Cairncross, who were the other three members of the Cambridge spy ring known as the Magnificent Five, were papal knights tied to the Knights of Malta and the Shrine of Freemasonry. They were first and foremost loyal Jesuit Superior General Jansen's and his international Vatican intelligence network, while they all participated in the Kennedy assassination. The Cold War of attrition was in full swing. This Inquisition, controlled by the Jesuits in Rome, with their blue blood Knights of Malta and their commoners Shrine of Freemasons controlling the international intelligence community, returned the world to the Dark Ages. It destroyed heretics by the millions and crushed all movements toward popular liberty. On the ruins of many attempts at liberty, it's erected absolutist fascist military dictatorship loyal to the papal Caesar and the Vatican. In establishing these dictatorships, we read the words of Colonel James Bo Gritz: the era of violent peace actually got underway in earnest from the day John F. Kennedy was killed. It has been waged against the electoral system in this country, vote scam, and against the entire populations in Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, the Congo, Greece, Chile, Guatemala, Angola, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Panama, the Dominican Republic, Grenada, Libya, the Persian Gulf, Korea, Lebanon, and other emerging countries that we helped overthrow in order to establish either military dictatorship or transparently fascist democracies. John Stockwell, one of the highest-ranking CIA case officers, over to go public in his denunciation of agency's covert operations, said recently that the agency has conducted over 3,000 major campaigns since its official inception in 1947, and the death toll due directly to these operations has risen to over 10 million souls. And examining the purposes of the Jesuits' Cold War, which were many, the most outstanding were: number one, to kill heretics and liberals worldwide pursuant to the Jesuit oath and the Council of Trent. Number two, to destroy a great enemy in Protestant British Empire. Number three, to destroy popular liberty and national sovereignty, erecting in their place dictators loyal to Rome pursuant to the policies of Jesuits' Holy Alliance. Number four, to establish the Zionist state of Israel for the purpose of using the Jewish race to secure Jerusalem for the future worldwide worship of the risen Pope, the Antichrist, ruling the world from Solomon's temple in Jerusalem. Point number five, to build and perfect the international intelligence community, fulfilling the purposes of the Jesuits' holy office of the Inquisition, to weaken the people of the American Empire for their future destruction using the international drug trade and orthodox allopathic medicine. And point number seven, to build the Russian war machine, the Russian war machine and merchant marine for the purpose of invading the American Empire from the west, thereby destroying the last haven for the world's Protestants, Baptists, Jews, and liberal refugees. In conclusion, the Jesuits, in creating the Cold War with the airborne nuclear war hoax, enabled the entire Nazi intelligence apparatus to escape unpunished while perfecting the inner workings of the Vatican, CIA / KGB international intelligence community. The order hastened the return of the blessed despotism, the Dark Ages, when the Pope was the king despot of the world, ruling all nations from Rome, the eternal city in the Vatican. With the coming new Dark Age, during the Great Tribulation foretold by Jesus, that prophet and Messiah, resurrected Jesuit pontiff as the man-beast, whose name may well be Pan or Set, whose mark may indeed be IHS, and whose number will absolutely be 666. One of the three to be displayed on every forehead or right hand of his universal worshippers shall rule all nations from Jerusalem, the holy city, Solomon's rebuilt temple. Daniel 8:24 and 25, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. He shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace destroy many. By peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. Dear truth seeker, if you are not familiar with the ancient Jewish hope of Israel concerning their Messiah coming to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem, though all the people of the earth be gathered against it and rule this world from his spectacular messianic temple in Jerusalem, described in detail by Ezekiel the prophet, he forever sitting on the ancient throne of David as the Prince of Peace, while the nations beat their swords into plowshares, as foretold by Isaiah the prophet, it would be wise to read George Peter's rare 3-volume set, The Theocratic Kingdom, having been written in the mid-19th century. Albert J. McLean's The Greatness of the Kingdom, written in the mid-20th century, is also superb. If you're not understanding the prophecy of the 70 weeks of years given to Daniel the prophet in Daniel 9:24-27, Sir Robert Anderson's The Common Prince, also written in the late 19th century, is the greatest treatise on the subject, being totally irrefutable. For with the 70th week of years being yet future, the prince that shall come, called the abomination of desolation by Jesus the Messiah in Matthew 24:15, is yet to appear in human history. He will greatly persecute the Semitic Jewish race and attempting their final extinction. But he shall be broken without hand by the one who is called faithful and true. Amen. So here we have, Jean-Baptiste Janssen, 27th Superior General of the Society of Jesus, 1946-64. This Black Pope during the Cold War waged against the world's heretics and liberals pursuant to the evil Council of Trent, controlled by the CIA in the West and the KGB in the East. His Cold War factions fomented the order's Middle East Zionist/PLO agitation necessary for the rebuilding of Solomon's Temple. Therefore, he gave the order to execute President Kennedy for attempting to end the Papal Caesar's Cold War, including Francis Cardinal Spellman's war in Vietnam, the Cardinal having visited American soldiers during the Christmas of 1965, and for threatening to break the CIA into 1,000 pieces before the Papal's inquisitions. International intelligence community had been fully financed, completed, and perfected, including its many deep underground military bases. Here we have Gregory Peter XV, Cardinal Agajanian, 1958, Patriarch of the Armenian Church, USSR. In 1946, Papal Caesar Pius XII, on the advice of his Jesuit confessor, Cardinal Beatz, appointed Jesuit-trained Spellman, he controlling the OSS/CIA, as the Cardinal for the American Empire, Jesuit-trained Gajanian, overseeing the NKVD/KGB as the Cardinal for the Soviet Empire. Gajanian and Stalin were fellow Georgians, and both attended the Jesuit-controlled Orthodox Tiflis Seminary. Thus, the Black Pope's Cardinal of the Kremlin was Koba's favorite. This man, a personal friend of Cardinal Spellman, ran the Gulag Archipelago, which then and now comprises hundreds of concentration camps within the USSR. Here we have General Prince Anton Vasilievich Turko, 1956. Knight of Malta, Anton Turko, whose distant relative was Privy Councillor Turko, having contributed to the signing of a concordat between Pope Pius IX and Tsar Nicholas I in 1847, was the Black Pope's greatest defender of the Papal Caesar's temporal power in communist Russia. As Stalin's foremost intelligence officer, using Jesuits like Pierre Michel as couriers escorted by the GPU, he broke up the anti-Bolshevik groups after World War I, along with Jesuit Theodore Malley, wrecked General Andrei Vlasov's anti-Stalinist army, crushed the Nazis on the Eastern Front, aided by Galen Org, used the Vatican Red Lines for Soviet intelligence during the Cold War, and with the help of Alan Dulles, SS/CIA, incited and then murdered thousands of liberals during the Hungarian Revolution of 1956 pursuant to the evil Council of Trent. This knight of the Pope's Vatican Empire was Cardinal Agajanian's secret inquisitor of the USSR, Unholy Trinity of Vatican and Nazis and Soviet intelligence, Mark Ahrens and John Loftus, New York, St. Martin's Press, 1991. And here we have Reinhard Galen, Nazi Roman Catholic General Reinhard Gehlen, 1945, having provided false intelligence resulting in the betrayal and the defeat of the starving German armies in the East, he later surrendered to the Allies, becoming an American Army officer and a powerful force within the CIA. Nazi CIA and BND Knight of Malta, Reinhard Gehlen, in the 60s. Here we have him again, with all his regalia, right? All the Masonic regalia. For his obedience, Gehlen, along with FDR's ambassador Vatican, Myron C. Taylor, received the highest award that could be given by the Pope's Grand Master, by SMOM, the Grand Croce of Merito con Placa. Knight of Malta, James Angleton. Freemason David Ben Gurion, 1969. According to Loftus, in the secret war against the Jews, Reinhard Gehlen trained Israeli intelligence and Mossad, with James Jesus Angleton, CIA chief of counterintelligence, manning both the Israeli desk and the Vatican desk. Within the CIA, the Black Pope was now complete control of his post-war international intelligence community, which included the British SIS, the German BND, the Soviet KGB, and the Chinese SCIS. According to Ben Heck, in his perfidy, Ben Gurion, through Rudolf Kastner, as Zionist agent leading Hungary's Jewish rescue committee, had collaborated with the Nazis during the war by refusing to warn Europe's Jews of their impending doom. SS Colonel Eichmann collaborated with Ben Gurion each through their agents, SS Colonel Kurt Becker and Rudolf Kastner. Meanwhile, Angleton was not only working in conjunction with the Jesuits in control of the Vatican intelligence, but with two other American Knights of Malta, OSS Director Wild Bill Donovan and FDR's unofficial ambassador to Pope Pius the 12th, CFR member Myron C. Taylor. In 1961, as a result of the Kastner affair, which included the revelation that both Chaim Weizmann and Ben Gurion betrayed the honest Jewish emissary Joel Brand into the hands of the British, thus ensuring the Nazi murder of 400,000 Hungarian Jews, the Black Pope, in order to bolster his Ben Gurion-led Labor Zionist government, sacrificed SKP Adolf Eichmann by handing him over to the Israeli people. Hence, the master-servant relationship established between the papacy, SS, CIA, and the Mossad is in full force today, serving the ends of the Jesuit Superior General, the taking off the Temple Mount from the Muslims, the destruction of the mosques on that Temple Mount, and the building of the Third Hebrew Temple. In that temple will sit the risen seventh Roman King Caesar Pope. Revelation 17:10-11, the final Pope whose deadly wound was healed. Revelation 13:12, the abomination of desolation. Matthew 24:15, during the final future Jewish Holocaust. The time of Jacob's trouble. Jeremiah 37. All right, now we're going to go a little bit back in the book to chapter 34 and continue reading a little bit more about the history here. And this chapter speaks about the FBI. So let's start. Opus Dei's FBI, MI5, Louis J. Free, director, and FBI / KGB, Robert Philip Hansen's counterintelligence. Let's start. Ought we not to conclude that we are called to win to God, the Pope, not only a single nation, a single country, but all nations, all the kingdom of the world. Ignatius Loyola, the founder and the first Black Pope, Jesuits. As you can see, founder, first Jesuit general, 1540 to 1556. See, my Lord, from this room I govern not only Paris, but China, not only China, but the whole world, without anyone knowing 'tis meant. Michelangelo Tamburini, 1720, 14th Jesuit general, 1706 to 1730, speaking to Duke of Brancas. Before we begin to discover how the Jesuit order converted their American empire into a police state with Hoover's FBI, we must first be reminded of its past commercial power with its ability to gather intelligence to virtually anyone. We read from the work of a great English Protestant, William Howard, published in 1833. They entered in a trade and were scattered all over the world, wearing no outward appearance but that of merchants, yet keeping up a secret correspondence with one another and with their general, and transmitting intelligence and wealth from all quarters of the globe. They evidently had formed the bold design of acquiring the spiritual and political sovereignty of the world. Let us imagine 20,000 traders dispersed over the world, from Japan to Brazil, from the Cape of Good Hope to the north, all correspondents of each other, all blindly subjected to one individual and working for him alone. So here was the International Order of the Society of Jesus, conducting worldwide trade while gathering intelligence at every port. All information was then sent to the general in Rome, where massive files were kept on everyone and everything. Eugene Sue, the world-renowned author of The Wandering Jew, tells us in 1844 of the Black Pope's international intelligence community, yet in this infancy in comparison to the monstrosity it would become in the bloody 20th century. In quoting letters on the clergy written by Libri, a member of the French Institute, we read in bold type this subtle serpent's most ghastly description. The principal houses correspond with that in Paris. They are also in direct communication with the general who resides at Rome. The correspondence of the Jesuits, so active, various, and organized in so wonderful a manner, has for its object to supply the heads with all the information they can require. Every day, the general receives a host of reports which serve to check one another. In the central house at Rome are immense registers, in which are inscribed the names of all the Jesuits, of all their adherents, and of all their considerable persons, whether friends or enemies, with whom they have any connection. In these registers are reported without alteration, hatred, or passion, the facts relating the life of each individual. It is the most gigantic biographical collection that has ever been formed. The frailties of a woman, the secret errors of a statesman are chronicled in this book with the same cold impartiality, drawn up for the purpose of being useful. These biographies are necessarily exact. When the Jesuits wish to influence an individual, they have but to turn this book, and they know immediately his life, his character, his parts, his faults, his projects, his family, his friends, his most secret ties. Conceive what a superior facility of action this immense police register, which includes the whole world, must give to any one society. It is not lightly that I speak of these registers. I have my facts from a person who has seen this collection and who is perfectly well acquainted with the Jesuits. Here, then, is matter to reflect on for all those families who admit freely into their houses the members of a community that carries its biographical researches to such a point. Dear truth seeker, we wonder how many Jesuits man the Black Pope's Federal Bureau of Investigation, how many work for the Attorneys General's Inquisition and Justice Department, and how many labor deep within the intricate apparatus of the Central Intelligence Agency, including its secret worldwide underground facilities and its gigantic partner employing 25,000 people, the National Security Agency. An article nearly identical to the narration of Eugene Sue appeared in Harper's Weekly of May 21st, 1870. We read of the Jesuit command post in Rome. The operations of this powerful society embrace every part of the world and are carried on by means of the most intricate machinery ever contrived by man. The society is divided in 5 classes. Point 1. Class number 1. Professed fathers members, prophesy, priests who have taken the 3 perpetual vows and a deadly Jesuit extreme oath, the perpetual 4th vow, administered by the Jesuit general himself. 2. Spiritual coadjutors, priests of the perpetual 3 vows. 3. Lay temporal coadjutors, lay brothers of the 3 perpetual vows. 4. Approved pupils, juniors and scholastics of the 3 perpetual vows. And 5. The novices, training concluded by taking 3 perpetual vows. From his residence in Rome, the general directs the movements of society in every part of the world by means of a system in which the art of espionage is brought to perfection. Every month or every quarter, he receives reports from the heads of all the subordinate departments. On every 3rd year, the catalogues of every province with detailed reports on capacity and conduct of every member are laid before him. Besides this, the most active correspondence is maintained with all parts of the world in order to supply the officers of the society with the information they require. In the central house at Rome are kept voluminous registers in which are inscribed the names of all Jesuits, of their adherents, and of all the considerable persons, whether friends or enemies, with whom they have any connection. In these registers, we are told, are reported without alteration, without hatred, without passion, the facts relating to the life of each individual. It is the most gigantic biographical collection that has ever been formed. The frailties of a woman, the secret errors of a statesman are chronicled in these books with the same cold impartiality, drawn up for the purpose of being useful. These biographies are necessarily exact. When the Jesuits wish to influence an individual, they have but to turn to these volumes to know immediately his life, his character, his faults, his family, his friends, his most secret ties. By the use of such machinery, the order has attained its high position and widespread influence. As we can see, by the beginning of the 20th century, the Jesuit order had this all-pervading power and intelligence. To know everything about everyone was one of its chief goals. We must remember that the Jesuits had been in control of England no later than 1800 during the reign of King George III. Over the years, with the aid of Knights of Malta and Shriner Freemasonry, their power became supreme and was therefore in control of the British Secret Service. We must also remember that the Jesuits were in control of the Vatican with its hierarchy since their restoration by Pope Pius VII in 1814. That means all correspondence of every priest, bishop, archbishop, and cardinal from around the world was subject to Jesuit review. Even the Pope's confessor was and is today a Jesuit. Nino Lobello tells us, the Pope's confessor, an ordinary priest, must be a Jesuit. He must visit the Vatican once a week at a fixed time, and he alone may absolve the Pope of his sins. How can an unsaved man commit daily acts of sin who at the same time is infallible when speaking ex cathedra for a brief moment of time while decreeing the doctrine of the papal institution? But how would the Jesuits expand their police registry, lists, and indexes on individuals into the United States? They would use the Bonapartes once again, for as the Freemason Napoleon I was their tool during the Napoleonic Wars, and his nephew Napoleon III was their tool during the Crimean War and the Franco-Prussian War. Even so was Charles Joseph Bonaparte, their tool in creating the Bureau of Investigation. Bonaparte, a Masonic papal knight and grandnephew of the Emperor, created what became the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Empire's holy office of the Inquisition. It was made subject to the Empire's Grand Inquisitor, the Attorney General, and his Department of Justice, to be later manned in 1984 by Jesuits like U.S. Attorney John McCoon, newly established in 1870. The Empire's Grand Inquisitor was set up in the middle of a national crisis called Reconstruction, 1865 to 1876. During martial law, including the rape, pillage, and plunder Southern people by Northern soldiers and carpetbaggers, 2 years after the forced ratification of the 14th Amendment in 1868. The truth seeker, the Empire's holy office of the Inquisition, the FBI, would experience massive growth during the Jesuits' second 30 years. War under the all-seeing eye of its Shriner Freemason J. Edgar Hoover. Hoover would recruit most of his Roman Catholic inquisitors from Jesuit universities. We read, so Catholics were ultimately preferred. Hoover reportedly favored Irish Catholic youths, finding them generally clean-cut and good-looking and earnest about their religion. He actively sought them out, and later, after Notre Dame and Marquette Jesuit granted him honorary degrees, recruited heavily at those universities. Despite the Constitution, Bonaparte's bureau would come to exercise truly inquisitional power, not only domestically but also around the world. The FBI would keep the Jesuit Registry of Police indexes on individuals within the American Empire and would be a vital link in the Jesuits' international intelligence community. Based in Rome, within the Jesuit General's War Room, Orgo di Santo Spirito. Concerning the creation of the FBI, including its founder Charles Bonaparte, we read from Kurt Gentry's masterpiece. It had, for starters, been born illegitimately on July 1st, 1908. It was, as one congressman had correctly labeled it at the time, a bureaucratic bastard, the issue of a union unsanctioned by the Congress of the United States. However, its father was known. He was Charles Joseph Bonaparte, American-born grandnephew of Napoleon I and Attorney General of the United States from 1906 to 1908. From the boss, we read, from the time of Theodore Roosevelt's accession to the presidency, American presidents of the 20th century have begun to assert unprecedented claims to centralize power in the executive office. As part of this new federalism, President Roosevelt's Attorney General, Charles Bonaparte, by executive order, had created the Bureau of Investigation in 1908, an all-male secret society, at full-time investigative division of the Justice Department against the expressed wishes of Congress and while it had gone into recess. Dear Truth Seeker, in reflecting upon the last two quotes, do you smell a rat in the creation of the FBI? Should we not demand that it be abolished immediately? The Bureau was established to detect and prosecute crime against the United States. So the Jesuits, the masters of socialist communism and authors of the Bolshevik Revolution, created a straw dog called the Red Scare and then empowered their American Shika to shoot it down. The Bureau, in one of their mass roundups in 1918, arrested 50,000 ordinary American citizens. In 1921, J.F. Hoover was appointed Assistant Chief of the Bureau. In 1924, he was appointed Acting Director, and in 1935, the Bureau became the FBI. Until his murder in 1972, Hoover was a virtual dictator for nearly 50 years, as the Bureau had been patterned after the monarchical government of the Jesuit order. For Hoover, like the Jesuit general, wielded the power of an absolute monarch. During the years of World War II, the FBI grew enormously in power and influence under the supervision of the empire's most formidable Freemasons, J.F. Hoover and Franklin Roosevelt. Both were apostate Protestants, as neither accepted the Bible as their final authority of faith and practice. This gave the appearance that American tyranny was Protestant. This gave the appearance that American tyranny was Protestant. We must not forget that Charles Bonaparte, a Freemason, whose father Jerome Napoleon Bonaparte, 1784 to 1860, in addition to being a high-level French Freemason, had been an officer and the staff of the Jesuits Napoleon III. Created a Bureau that would enthrone Hoover, the Inquisitor, and Joe Kennedy, one of Archbishop Hayes, Knights of Malta, would be responsible for the election of the FDR. As always, the Freemasons are in the foreground, while the Jesuits and their Knights of Malta are in the background. Like the Jesuit Police Index in Rome, Hoover established indexes and lists on thousands of individuals illegally investigating their private lives without authorization from the Department of Justice, that is, an inquisition. Hoover also compiled other lists anticipating the erection of concentration camps. We read, Hoover had also, on his own initiative and without any statutory authority, set up a custodial attention list of persons to be rounded up and imprisoned and in concentration camps should the need arise. The list included journalists critical of the administration, writers critical of the FBI, and certain members of Congress. Hoover, like his Nazi counterpart Himmler, hated the Jews. He resisted Jewish immigration and blamed notorious crimes of the Jesuits on the Jews. For example, Emma Goldman was blamed and deported for inspiring President McKinley's assassination, and the Rosenbergs were convicted and electrocuted for giving Stalin nuclear secrets. The truth is, the Jesuits murdered McKinley with one of their foreign-born fanatical Roman Catholic assassins, and they used FDR to give Stalin the nuclear device in 1943. This treason committed through the company's international intelligence community, the OSS and NKVD, furthered the illusion of the Cold War and the communist threat. Using the Jews as scapegoats is nothing new. We are familiar with the Dreyfus affair and the Protocols of Zion. Lastly, the FBI had a working relationship with the MID and ONI that will be perfected over the years. This beginning in 1939, we read, during Hoover's meeting with Roosevelt and Cordell Hull, the president had ordered him to coordinate the FBI's investigation with Army's Military Intelligence Division, MID, and the Office of Naval Intelligence, ONI. Roosevelt's request simply formalized what was already an ongoing relationship. On June 26, 1939, Roosevelt sent a confidential presidential directive drafted by the FBI and Justice Department officials to the heads of the relevant departments stating, It is my desire that the investigation of all espionage, counter-espionage, and sabotage matters be controlled and handled by the FBI, MID, and ONI, and that no investigation in these areas be conducted except by the three agencies mentioned above. After the end of World War II, a host of FBI agents resigned, resulting in their replacement with many Jesuit-trained Roman Catholics. Two such agents and Opus Dei members were Louis J. Free, FBI Director, and tied to the Order's British MI5. to its Director General Stella Remington and Robert Philip Hansen. Counterintelligence, whose idol was the traitor Kim Philby, and America's most treasonous spy, tied to orders KGB via Vladimir Kyrukov. We read, during the Bureau's early years, there had been few Catholics in the upper echelons of the FBI, although there was an abundance of Masons. Although Hoover denied being prejudiced, not until the mid-1940s did the FBI begin recruiting agent applicants at Catholic universities such as Georgetown, Jesuit, Fordham, Jesuit, and Notre Dame. Two things were responsible for the change: the FBI's director's realization that the Catholic Church was strongly anti-communist and thus could be a valuable ally, and the need to replace the special agents who had defected NSA at the end of the war. Why the defection? In addition to soliciting Catholics as agents, informal liaison was developed with various church officials such as Francis Cardinal Spellman, Monsignor Fulton J. Sheen, and Father John F. Cronin. The FBI maintained close ties with Spellman, largely though Lou Nichols and later the New York SAC John Malone, even though Hoover's files contained numerous allegations that Spellman was a very active homosexual. When Lou Nichols retired in 1957, the man who took his place as the head of Crime Records Division and therefore became the liaison between the FBI and Cardinal Spellman was Cartha DeLoach, Knight of Malta. We read, Cartha DeLoach succeeded Louis Nichols as a head of Crime Records Division on the latter's retirement from the Bureau in 1957. The ties of the Jesuits with the FBI and thus the KGB are obvious. Through the Jesuit-trained American Pope Cardinal Spellman and the graduates of the Jesuits universities, the order had intimate ties with Hoover. The director not only hired graduates from the Jesuits Georgetown and Fordham universities, he was given an honorary degree from the Jesuits Marquette University, and he maintained close ties with that powerful Jesuit and Georgetown University Dean Edmund Walsh. And it was Walsh, an expert on international politics and the Soviet Union, who led a team of Jesuits in Russia in 1922 on a supposed mission of relief. Soon after Walsh's arrival, the Jesuit-trained Joseph Stalin was appointed secretary of the Communist Party and thus the head of the order's KGB, remaining so until the day of the risen Son of God, sovereignly intervened with a word from his lips and brought about the tyrant's premature death. For Satan, in attempting to nullify the promises given to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and David, inspired Stalin in 1953 with the doctor's case to justify the attempted execution of every Jew in Russia. And because of the Jesuit control of the FBI, Hoover denied the existence of the Roman Catholic Italian mafia. In fact, he consorted with New York mob boss Frank Costello, the personal friend of Knight of Malta Joe Kennedy. We read, there was no such thing as organized crime. Hoover insisted no such thing as a mafia, while they claimed that there existed a national crime syndicate was a self-baloney. There was theories as to why. Many suspected the reason was personal. They concluded J. Edgar Hoover himself was on a tape that he had reached an accommodation with the syndicate, and in particular with the New York crime boss Frank Costello. According to one tale, Hoover and Costello met regularly on a bench in Central Park, hardly a secret meeting place, to discuss mutual interests. Other accounts had the pair socializing at the Waldorf, where both had complimentary suites, or in most versions at the Stork Club. Like Hoover, Costello was a Stork Club regular, as were numerous other mob figures. Yet there is no question that they met or that they reached an accommodation of sorts, and Hoover, for his own still mysterious reasons, refused to admit that a national criminal organization existed. The Jesuits in control of the FBI, through Hoover and the Mafia, through its commission, one of its members being Frank Costello, were virtually unchallenged in 1946. In control of both the government and organized crime, the Jesuits would create the United Nations and the Cold War with their Masonic tools. Dirty Harry Truman and Smoking Winston Churchill. Why? To carry out the Jesuit oath in fulfilling the Council of Trent. restoring the temporal power of the Pope around the world, and to create Zionist Israel for the purpose of rebuilding Solomon's temple, and the final attempt of mass murder of the Jewish race. For if the Holy Seed, the physical descendants of the sons of Jacob, including the tribe of Manasseh, Ephraim, being another name for the tribe of Joseph, can be destroyed, of whom concerning the flesh Christ came, Romans 9:4, its Messiah would have no descendants of Jacob, over which to reign, as he is to sit upon the throne of David forever, with the 12 disciples sitting upon the 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Isaiah 9:7, Luke 1:32 and 33, Matthew 19:28. Israel's Messiah is to rule all nations in a worldwide earthly kingdom, bringing safety, peace, and honor to his repentant Jewish people, of whom he said, "We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews." John 4:22. Knowing this, the devil, with his infallible Pope using Zionism, is attempting to keep these unconditional promises of God given to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and David from being fulfilled in the future. In conclusion, the Jesuits have been the great intelligence gatherers of the past, and by 1870 had the largest intelligence apparatus in the world. In 1908, the Jesuits extended their apparatus into the United States with the creation of the BI. Through one of their Masonic papal knights, Charles Joseph Bonaparte, in order to give the impression that the BI, which later became the FBI, was not a Roman Catholic secret police, an apostate homosexual Presbyterian Protestant and Shriner Freemason was appointed as the director for nearly 50 years. The Bureau exercised inquisitional powers from the beginning. Mass roundups, lists, secret divisions, secret indexes, planned for concentration camps, etc. all betrayed the true colors of the bureaucratic bastard. It was the American secret police with powers as sweeping as Stalin's NKVD that would later prove as ruthless as Hitler's Gestapo. Without mercy, it would cunningly murder women and children of a Protestant religious sect in Waco, Texas, that was anti-Pope, as well as the wife and son of Randy Weaver, the Green Beret and Vietnam vet. While living peaceably in the backwoods of Idaho, the FBI sharpshooter who murdered Vicky Weaver and repeatedly fired into the Branch Davidian compound was a Japanese Roman Catholic and Papal Knight, Lon Horiuchi, whose subsequent superior was FBI Director, the Roman Catholic Papal Knight and member of Opus Dei, Louis J. Freeh. Louis Freeh, working in conjunction with the Black Pope's Israeli Mossad in planning for the demolition of the World Trade Center, further cemented the Bureau's relationship with the Masonic Jewish Zionist Anti-Defamation League by declaring that the FBI/ADL partnership had reached new heights. The master of both Freeh and Opus Dei's brother, John Freeh, was the American Empire's military vicar and the New York Archbishop of the capital of the world, John Cardinal O'Connor. With the authority of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, advised by Archbishop Francis Spellman and the Jesuit-controlled priest Charles E. Colin, Hoover's FBI forged alliances with the Army's Military Intelligence Division as well as the Office of Naval Intelligence. Openly, the FBI denied the existence of the Mafia. Secretly, the Bureau and the mob cooperated together, pursuing their mutual interests. Later, the FBI/ONI would forge an alliance with Roman Catholics, Luciano's Italian Mafia. Irish Roman Catholic Wild Bill Donovan's Office of Strategic Services would likewise collaborate with Luciano's Mafia. During the war, the USS would aid and abet without presidential authority Roman Catholic Stalins and KVD, as well as establish a working relationship with Sir Stuart Menzies' British Secret Service. After the war, the USS would help in evacuating the Jesuit generals Nazi SD Waffen-SS, an intelligence group of Europe via the Vatican Red Lines, simultaneously used by the Masonic Jewish Zionists in leading Europe's surviving and unsuspecting Jews to Palestine, merging Hitler's best with the CIA in the West and the KGB in the East. By 1963, the international intelligence community was firmly in place. The CIA, FBI, ONI, MIT, the Mafia, former Nazi SS within the CIA, the German BND, the British Secret Service, the Mossad, and KGB were all working together just as they had throughout the Jesuits' Second 30 Years' War, excluding the Mossad, as there was no Israel at that time, and in the interest of continuing the American crusade in Vietnam's Quad Spellies War, Rome's international intelligence community assassinated the Emperor of the Holy Roman American Empire, its commander-in-chief. The assassination was executed by anti-communist warriors of the Cold War, certain and select American Knights of Malta collaborating with certain and select Shrine of Freemasons specifically. These warriors were guided by the unseen hand of Francis Cardinal Spellman, the American Pope, as he had personally contact with every faction of the intelligence community, including the KGB, and thus Fidel Castro's Cuban intelligence. To one of his knights in the CIA, James Jesus Angleton, the Jesuits then successfully covered it up, killing over 100 witnesses within a 35-year period. Indeed, the arm of the church is long, for it is the Society of Jesus. Through its FBI and international intelligence community that has controlled the Holy Roman American Empire for the last 100 years, through which it has secretly ruled the world during Henry R. Lucy's and Jesuit John Courtney Murray's American Century. God help us to wake up. And here we have Masonic Papal Knight Charles Joseph Bonaparte, 1851 to 1921, United States Attorney General, 1906 to 1908. This sinister man was put in power by President Theodore Roosevelt, the Order's most obedient Shrine of Freemason and first real emperor of the Black Pope's Holy Roman 14th Amendment American Empire, and the son of Jerome Napoleon Bonaparte, who was a Masonic officer on the staff of the Jesuits Napoleon III. This Attorney General created the Bureau of Investigation 1908 on his own accord and against the express will of Congress, it fearing that the bureaucratic bastard who would become a spy system of espionage conducted by the national government to dig up the private scandals of men. The result of the FBI has become exactly that. Even worse, the order of the FBI is nothing more than an extension of the Papal Caesar's holy office of the Inquisition with all the powers of Hitler's Gestapo, Stalin's, and KBD. The FBI would be perfected under the leadership of the Jesuit Shrine of Freemason J. Edgar Hoover, who constantly attacked the force enemies of communism. Later, the FBI was used in the assassination of Knight of Columbus President John F. Kennedy, murderous cover-up overseen by the Bureau's Assistant Director, Cardinal Spellman's Knight of Malta, Cartha de Loche. And here we have Cardinal Spellman, 33rd degree Freemason, Knight of Columbus, Archbishop, right? FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. Knight of Columbus, Postmaster General, 1940s, James A. Farley, homosexual Spellman, was in complete control over the American Inquisition, through his homosexual Grand Anti-Communist Inquisitor and Shrine of Freemason J. Edgar Hoover, recruiting from the Jesuit institutions of Georgetown. Homosexual Spellman was in complete control of the American Inquisition through his homosexual Grand Anti-Communist Inquisitor and Shrine of Freemason J. Edgar Hoover, recruiting from the Jesuit institutions of Georgetown, Fordham, and Marquette universities. Many Irish and Italian Roman Catholics filled the ranks of Hoover's Federal Bureau of Investigation, including Ray Abaticchio and his nephew, G. Gordon Liddy. As Hoover, Spellman, and CFR Press, Lord Henry R. Lucy intrepidly mesmerized the mind of duped American public in carrying out the Black Pope's anti-communist agitation. Secret CFR connections forged between the Mafia and the CIA admitted to by CIA agent, Army Intelligence Colonel, and Gambino family member, the deceased Knight of Malta, Albert Vincent Caroni, as well as the FBI, ONI, and Secret Service became absolute. The cooperation among these agencies, overseen by Georgetown Jesuits and Cardinal Spellman's Papal Knights, would be necessary in carrying out the Kennedy assassination. Further, each successive Archbishop of New York would continue to use the CFR's Attorney General with his Justice Department and the order of the FBI in maintaining the great Jesuit cover-up through the years. James Farley was an usher at St. Patrick's Cathedral and member of FDR's cabinet. Chapter 43. The attempts to destroy the CIA, the intelligence arm of the Vatican. The defeat of Hitler was not to put an end to the Vatican's insidious work in free America. Does it not still have 30 million who are blindly devoted to the Holy See? It is more than the Jesuits required to develop a large-scale operation of the kind needed to ensure that occult domination over the state, which is the overriding purpose of their society. It is a fact that the policy of the State Department is under the influence of Cardinal Spellman. At least 50% the State Department personnel represent the point of view taught by the University of Georgetown, the Jesuit diplomatic school. This school is directed by the famous Jesuit father Edmund Walsh, a geopolitician, the General Karl Haushofer, the former Hitlerist theorist. Edmund Paris, 1964, French historian, Catholic Action, the Vatican against Europe. All was going well for the Vatican's Jesuits. With their international intelligence community, they had begun their inquisition and crusade in the Far East. Their tools, Truman and Eisenhower, had begun the Vietnam War, and it would prove to be a great harvest of heretics pursuant to the Jesuits' Council of Trent. The Cold War had been heated up with the sabotage of Francis Gary Powers' U-2 spy plane. Because of lack of fuel, it was forced on in Russia, which ended the planned meetings for peace between the United States and Russia. Nixon, openly backed by Spellman, who was secretly for Kennedy, would have continued Eisenhower's foreign policy of fighting communism. But surprise, surprise, John Kennedy won the election in 1960 by a mere 100,000 votes. As usual, the Society of Jesus, with their powerful Knights of Malta, had engineered the election. Kennedy, loyal to his masters, continued the Jesuits' communist Negro agitation called the Civil Rights Movement, inspired by Jesuits McSorley and Lafarge, forcibly integrating the armed services and thus further destroying the morale of our once invincible American military. He also, according to Dr. Peter Vedder, was used to rob Fort Knox of 14th Amendment America's gold, moving it to the Federal Reserve Bank in New York. But after the failure of the Bay of Pigs invasion, President Kennedy changed due to his betrayal by the Jesuits' Council on Foreign Relations in the person of McGeorge Bundy. He sought to break the CIA into 1,000 pieces. Why? Because the CIA was the teeth of the Council of Foreign Relations, the enforcer of the Empire's secret government. Of this relationship, Victor Marchetti tells us, it was in such an atmosphere of restedness and doubt on a January meeting in 1968 that a small group of former intelligence professionals and several other members of the cult of intelligence met to discuss the role of the CIA in U.S. foreign policy, not at CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, but at the Harold Pratt House on Park Avenue, the home of Council on Foreign Relations. And no wonder, for Alan Dulles, the director of the CIA in 1961, had been a CFR member for years, just like Bundy, who was Dulles' tool to wreck the Cuban invasion that Kennedy had approved. So Kennedy secretly fired Dulles, the darling of the Vatican Jesuit, while openly accepted his resignation. Kennedy then appointed John A. McCone to replace him. McCone was one of Spellman's knights and would prove to be one of the president's assassins, resigning in 1965. Meanwhile, President Kennedy seriously resisted the power of Vatican's Jesuit General Janssens. First, according to the Washington Post, he determined to destroy the CIA, that agency which Truman described after the Kennedy assassination as a symbol of sinister and mysterious foreign intrigue. We read, Kennedy did fail in his attempt to gain full control over the CIA and its major partners in the Defense Department. It was the most crucial failure of his abbreviated presidency. He recognized his adversary during his first term, and as he related confidentially to intimate acquaintances, when I am re-elected, I am going to break that agency in 1,000 pieces. He meant to do it too, but the struggle cost him his life. Secondly, President Kennedy sought to end the Vietnam War. The way in which he sought To end, it was described in a report entitled Memorandum for the President, subject, Report of McNamara Taylor, Mission to South Vietnam. With this report in hand, President Kennedy had what he wanted. It contained the essence of decisions he had to make. He had to get reelected to finish programs set in motion during his first term. He had to get Americans out of Vietnam. President Kennedy began to implement these policies along with limiting the power of the CIA. But those policies were reversed. On November 22, 1963, the government of the United States was taken over by the superpower group, the Order, merely using its American intelligence community to remove one of the presidential creations that wanted an escalation of the warfare in Indochina and a continuing military buildup for generations to come. And who was responsible for the reversal of President Kennedy's policies after his brutal assassination? It was the Jesuits, CIA, controlled by one of Cardinal Spellman's Knights of Malta, John A. McCone. We read from the book, First-Hand Knowledge, written by CIA agent and Kennedy assessor Robert D. Morrow. At 8:30 a.m. on Saturday, 24th of November, 1963, the limousine carrying CIA Director John McCone pulled into the White House ground. McCone was there to brief the president and the slain president's former aide, McGeorge Bundy, the one responsible for the failure of the Bay of Pigs invasion. He was also there to transact one piece of business prior to becoming involved in all the details entitled in a presidential transition, the signing of National Security Memorandum 278, in fact 273, a classified document which immediately reversed John Kennedy's decision to de-escalate the war in Vietnam. The effect of Memorandum 278 would give the Central Intelligence Agency carte blanche to proceed with a full-scale war in the Far East, a war that would eventually involve over 500,000 Americans in a life-and-death struggle without the necessity of congressional approval. In effect, as of November 23, 1963, the Far East would replace Cuba as the thorn in America's side because the Jesuits had given Cuba to Castro. It would also create a whole new source of narcotics for the mafia's worldwide markets. As mentioned earlier, Victor Marchetti, the former deputy director to Richard Helms, claimed in his book, The CIA and the Cult of Intelligence, that Air America, the CIA's property airline, that Air America, the CIA's proprietary airline, was used as a carrier for opium. Dear Truth Seeker, there you have it. The Vatican's Jesuits with their tool Cardinal Spellman, using one of the Knights of Malta, John A. McCone, escalated the Vatican's war in Vietnam and gave the CIA unlimited power to carry out the Jesuit general's policy of mass murder while developing the mafia's drug trade. Every segment of Rome's fraternity benefited. The Vatican's Federal Reserve Bank made trillions financing the military-industrial complexes of both the East and West. The international intelligence community grew to unbelievable proportions, united in its apex in the Vatican. The pharmaceutical industry made billions. The mafia made billions with the drug trade. Rome's oil companies and Arab nations made billions. President Johnson and his Texas oilmen made billions. And as the tankers of Rome's shipping tycoons unloaded their crude in both Saigon and Hanoi, and millions of heretics were murdered throughout Southeast Asia. The blindly patriotic people of the 14th Amendment America were further reduced to economic and political slavery, with its white Protestant middle class further destroyed, along with 80,000 vets committing suicide, many of whom having suffered untold tortures. Thirdly, President Kennedy also resisted the Jesuits' Federal Reserve Bank and its monopoly fiat money, properly called indulgences. Colonel Gritz writes, when Kennedy called for a return of America's currency to the gold standard and the dismantling of the Federal Reserve System, he actually minted non-debt money that does not bear the mark of the Federal Reserve. When he dared to actually exercise the leadership authority granted to him by the U.S. Constitution, Kennedy prepared his own death warrant. It was time for him to go. Indeed, it was time for him to go. Like Lincoln, resisting the policies of radical red Republicans leading the adoption of the 14th Amendment. So Kennedy resisted the policies of the Council of Foreign Relations, leading to the war in Vietnam. Neither could he be allowed to serve a second term. John F. Kennedy, unlike any president since Lincoln, truly resisted the superpower group Colonel L. Fletcher's Prouties, the Secret Team, so described by Papal Knight of Malta Daniel Sheehan, the chief legal counsel of the Jesuits Christic Institute, and called the Octopus by the murdered freelance writer Denny Casolaro, known in history as the Society of Jesus. May we Americans never forget the courage that President John F. Kennedy showed in refusing to bow to Francis Cardinal Spellman, knowing full well that his countrymen would never appreciate the pain and national tragedy he sought to prevent. Indeed, his several acts in resisting Jesuit tyranny were profiles in courage, forever wounded in the house of his friends, who continue their betrayal of the last bastion of freedom in the world, and America founded on Protestant and Baptist Calvinist liberties. Their continual example of sinning by silence, allowing our enemies to triumph over us, makes cowards of our men, whores of our women, undisciplined idiots of our children, and slaves of us all. Right here we have Knights of Columbus, John F. Kennedy, Shriner Freemason right up here, Allen W. Dulles, and Knight of Malta, John A. McCone in 1962. Because of Allen Dulles' deliberate sabotage of the Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961, President Kennedy dismissed him and appointed John McCone in his place. But Knight McCone was loyal to his master at the Little Vatican in New York, Archbishop and Knight of Columbus Francis Cardinal Spellman. As a former head of the Atomic Energy Commission and deeply tied to Vatican corporations composing the American Empire's military-industrial complex, he used certain CIA soldiers such as Clay L. Shaw, George de Mohrenschildt, David Ferry, E. Howard Hunt, and Patsy Lee Harvey Oswald to murder the president, with the Black Pope pulling the strings. Allen Dulles, through John McCone, oversaw the entire assassination and then was appointed to the cover-up Warren Commission with the blessing of the Papal Caesar in Rome. Jesuit priest John Lafarge, 1938, fought the American Black Civil Rights Movement. In accordance with Metternich's Holy Alliance and the Black Pope's Council of Trent, the Society of Jesus had been committed to the destruction of our Protestant Republic and our heretic and liberal American people. Therefore, it began the Negro agitation in the early 1930s, with Lafarge hypocritically accusing Protestants of instigating slavery and inventing racism when the Jesuits were the largest slaveholders in Maryland from 1650 to 1838. This agitation culminated in the violent civil rights movement of the 1960s. Led by the Jesuit-controlled socialist Martin Luther King, the order's purpose, expressed by Emmanuel Josephson, was to use the Negro to destroy our republic by inciting them to savagery to effect a complete breakdown of law and order that will serve as a perfect pretext for establishing dictatorship under themselves that will be welcomed by a terrified nation. Remembering Malcolm X had boldly declared that the Ku Klux Klan and the Nation of Islam have the same paymasters. Jesuit New Dealers Robert Hardnett and Georgetown's Richard McSorley continued the agitation, culminating in the 1964 Civil Rights Act and forced integration of the hated public schools, leading to amalgamation, which always leads to moral corruption and violence. Genesis 6, making America a weak nation of color like Castro's Cuba. Chapter 45, the FBI, the Secret Service, and the Jesuit. Let proper methods be used to get knowledge of the animosities that arise among great men, that we may have a finger in reconciling their differences, for by this means we shall gradually become acquainted with their friends and secret affairs, and of necessity engage one of the parties in our interests. Ignatius Loyola, 1540, founder, first Jesuit general, 1540 to 1556. Whoever wishes in this society, which we desire should be distinguished by the name of Jesus, formerly known as the Knights of the Black Virgin Mary, to fight as a soldier of God under the banner of the cross, and to serve only the Lord and his bride, The Church under the Roman Pope, the earthly vicar of Christ, after taking the solemn vow of eternal chastity, poverty, and obedience, must also render service in reconciling quarrels. Ignatius Loyola, 1540, founder, first Jesuit general, 1540 to 1556. With the assassination of President Kennedy, as in all well-laid plans of mice and men, there were a few glicks, or difficulties that arose. One such difficulty was a hostility having arisen between the less informed agents of the FBI and the Secret Service. Each blamed the other as being responsible for the president's death. Hoover and DeLoach of the FBI and Rowley, Greer, Kellerman, Hill, and Hickey of the Secret Service knew quite well who killed the president. But the lower ranks, not in the know, were quarreling. Cardinal Spellman's agent and Knight of Malta, Arthur DeLoach, gives us a most fascinating narration of how the quarrel was resolved. As the third in command of the FBI, Knight DeLoach tells us his cover-up work Hoover's FBI of the absolute power of the Jesuit order wields over the American Empire's most renowned police agencies. He writes, "It was a bad time to quarrel. The nation needed to believe that the President of the United States was safe while driving down the streets of America. As the quarrel worsened, Father Daniel J. Power, S.J. Society of Jesus, head of development at Georgetown Jesuit University, called me and said, 'Deke, why don't you and Jim Rowley, Roman Catholic Papal Knight, have a quiet lunch with me at my office at the university?' Rowley, chief of the Secret Service, was a former FBI agent whom I knew and liked. We both accepted. It was the first of a number of such luncheons. Following each, I wrote a memorandum to J. Edgar Hoover with the increasing conviction that Rowley wished to cooperate rather than, as Hoover suspected, make the FBI a scapegoat for his own agency's shortcomings. Eventually, we worked out a number of administrative procedures that strengthened the relationship between the Secret Service and the FBI and ensured greater protection for the president and his family. Today, it is far less likely that a Lee Harvey Oswald could slip through our net. This reconciliation was all the more essential because of the new president. Lyndon Johnson issued an executive order allowing the president to use the FBI for protection as well as the Secret Service. Had Rowley and I not worked out our difficulties, such efforts would have been difficult at best. Dear Truth Seeker, this incident is a prime example of the Jesuit unseen hand in Washington to be able to calm the storm between the Empire's two most powerful police agencies, revealed who truly maintains order, who rules in 14th Amendment America. The result of these meetings between Knight of Malta, Arthur DeLoach, and Jim Rowley at the feet of their master, Daniel Power, the Jesuit, was the further centralization of presidential power in Washington. Hoover's bureaucratic bastard, the Holy Office of Inquisition in America, moved another step closer to becoming the Empire's Nazi fascist Gestapo. President Johnson, the Freemason, gave Cardinal Spellman his extirpation of heretics in Vietnam, and CIA Director John A. McCone, the Knight of Malta, gave the Jesuit General Secret Team its international drug trade. That massive drug trade would greatly accelerate the weakening of the destruction of the white Celtic Anglo-Saxon peoples, coupled with forced integration, amalgamation, miscegenation, unreported black-on-white crime, the mass marketing of corrupted pro-Latin Vulgate Bibles, and gun confiscation. They, having founded the great and mighty Protestant nations of Western civilization, while being the risen Son of God's most devoted Bible-believing preachers and missionaries in the history of the true blood-bought Church of the Lord Jesus Christ, is this not in fact a righteous judgment of the Lord against the predominantly atheistic and immoral Bible-rejecting white race of both the British and American empires for harboring, protecting, and financing that calculating, cold-blooded viper, the company of Jesus, as it pursues its hell-bent quest in destroying the Protestant Reformation? The unrestrained and unpunished drug trade, coupled with the loss of Hong Kong, will provide the economic base for building the military Goliath and the Far East, our future invader and destroyer, the Red Chinese Army, and the destruction of the Muslim mosques and holy places in Mecca, Medina, and Jerusalem, secretly carried out by the Black Pope's international intelligence community, overseeing the Masonic leadership. If the Islamic nations and the Masonic leadership of Zionist Israel will fire the hearts of yet another one of our future invaders, the Muslim world, having survived Rome's present war against Islam, the papal Caesar, having finally made Jerusalem an international city under the protection of his revived Holy Roman European Empire. One of our heroes, the ex-Jesuit Alberto Rivera, having gained a secret knowledge of Vatican intelligence through the instruction of one of the Black Pope's most powerful Jesuits and confessor, Pope Pius XII, Augustine Cardinal B, correctly declared Jerusalem will fall into the hands of the Pope and the Muslim nations via Shrine of Freemasonry will assist him. The last Pope will be the Antichrist who knows he must flee to Jerusalem to escape from the Vatican just before it is destroyed. Revelation 17:16. That secret team, in command of the coming Red Chinese invasion of the Empire's west coast and the United Muslim invasion of the Empire's southeast coast, is the Borg of Star Trek, the militia of the Black Pope controlling the Papal Caesar, the Company of Ignatius Loyola, respectively known as the Society of Jesus, or as the great reformer John Calvin surnamed these brainwashed, mind-controlled religious fanatics and forever warring fiery mass murderers of the risen Son of God's Bible-believing church, as well as his Semitic Hebrew/Jewish nation of Israel, yet to experience her national blessing under Messiah's Abrahamic covenant. They are the Jesuits. Here we have Roman Catholic Knight James J. Rowley, Chief of the Secret Service assassins. Clint Hill, Roy Kellerman, and William Greer, Lyndon Johnson, right here, conspirators, President Johnson, and FBI Assistant Director DeLoach. Life magazine, piecing together the evidence, Gerald Ford, October the 2nd, 1964, and the official Warren Commission report on the assassination of President Kennedy and Hoover's FBI. So anyway, we just finished with that. That was from Eric John Phelps's book, Vatican Assassins, which is a great, source for Jesuit order, for the New World Order. Anything you really want to know, as you can see, we did not even cover up. I mean, this book has 730 pages, and we have not even covered, we just covered a little bit of it, right? We haven't even scratched the surface. As you can see right here, there's the mafia still. He talks more about the CIA as well, right in these chapters right here. The American Mafia. There's so much more here that we have not even touched on. The Jesuit conspiracy, of course. Even before here, we have Council on Foreign Relations, okay? Fidel Castro, communism, right? The CIA and KGB, okay, we read a portion of that one. And then we have the Opus Dei, we also read that. But you have the Italian Mafia right here. Create the Shika, NKVD, KGB, SVR, we have not even checked that out. The Bolshevik Revolution, right? Which was mentioned in a few of these chapters, right? There we have Jesuitism and Freemasonry work together. I mean, it would take me months to get through this book and to read it all to you. The Monroe Doctrine. I mean, there is so much here, okay? Napoleon Bonaparte, Great Prussia. I mean, there's really a lot here that we could still read. And there's even more CIA stuff that I have not read everything on the CIA and the FBI right here. I'll show you right here. There was another chapter right here. Low-level CIA agents via George Bundy and Cardinal Spellman's Council of Foreign Relations. There is so much here. Attempts to destroy the CIA here. We read that one. But there's more here, right? As you can see. More Council of Foreign Relations, David Rockefeller and his Council of Foreign Relations. I mean, we could go and read. Like I said, it would take me months to get through this. And there's also another book, which is the 3rd edition of this book. As you can see it right here. Vatican Assassins Wounded in the House of My Friends, the 3rd edition. 1,833 pages. And of course, in this one, sorry about that. In that one, you get a lot of fun. Why is it doing this? Sorry. Alright, now, in this book, you get a lot more pictures. You get maps. You get all kinds of stuff. You get documents that they released. I mean, there is so much here. And yes, he's talking pretty much about the same things, but he expands a lot more into this. A lot more, and adds even more. You see, there are some documents there as well, and he adds a lot more into this. I mean, so yeah, if you can get your hands on this book, a hard copy would be great. This is not in print. You can buy it through his page or just get it used from eBay or Amazon. If you can get your hands on it, get your hands on it. It's definitely worth it, and it's the best you can get on the Vatican Jesuit popery conspiracies. Well, I just call them facts. I don't even think they're conspiracies. But, you know, for all those people that say, you know, it's the Jews, families, the Jewish rich banking families that run the world, he gives proof and shows you how they actually work for the Vatican, and how, you know, the Jews have been used as scapegoats for centuries, okay? So he proves that all in this book. So this is a great book if you want to, you know, up your knowledge a little bit on the New World Order and all that kind of stuff, right? So definitely recommend this book. I don't agree with everything that he says. You know, I know he's a pastor and he's a Calvinist and all of that. You know, I don't agree with all his doctrines, of course not. But nevertheless, he is the best, you know, historian when it comes to the Jesuit order. And if you don't know who he is, or never heard of him before, you can check it right here. I have some videos where he's in that I posted in the past, I believe, right here. Let me show you which ones you can watch. This actually is his documentary, The Vatican Secret Societies, Jesuits and the New World Order Exposed. As you can see, it's almost 3 hours long. And then as well here, Jesuits, the Priesthood of Absolute Evil Exposed, which he appears in as well. So if you're interested, take a look. And then, of course, he mentioned Alberto Rivera, right? Who was a Jesuit priest that later on ratted on them. Made that famous interview. Here's the full interview. Some of them are like 45 minutes, half an hour. This is the full interview, over 1 hour. 1 hour and 4 minutes, the Jesuit infiltration Alberto Rivera interview. I hope this was a blessing to you guys. You know, if you want me to read more, you know, and record this, if you like me reading this to you guys, and if you enjoyed it, let me know in the comment section. You know, I'll try to do my best. And yeah, I hope this was a blessing. I'm praying for you guys. I appreciate you all. I love you all. And I see you on Thursday for Led by Devil. It's 13. I have not uploaded it yet. We'll be either today or tomorrow. I hope it was a blessing, and see you guys this Thursday. God bless.